The concepts explored in our science fiction have grown at the same exponential pace as the endless technological progression of society. As with the fixation on mutant monsters throughout the early nuclear age of the 50s and 60s, the rise of accessibility in personal computing through the 70s saw an explosive interest through the late 70s and 80s on the subject of artificial intelligence. Films like Alien and Terminator explored the nightmare scenario of synthetic human-like robots turning on their human masters, whilst Blade Runner explored the much deeper concept of a sufficiently conscious synthetic being experiencing the same existential dilemma humans experience when faced with his own machine-like mortality. Of particular interest to me, however, is not simply the idea that computers may come to realistically emulate or even learn in a very neurological manner some spectrum of human emotion, but rather the inverse and frankly far more philosophically immediate question of how far removed actual human intelligence is from a predefined computer program. When you think about it, the Turing test, which for many years served as the benchmark for artificial intelligence, is really somewhat of a double-edged sword. Overly complex recursion aside, if the goal is to emulate human conversational behaviour to a degree that a conversational AI bot is indistinguishable from a supposedly sentient human, then it stands to reason that in a successful blind experiment, the human behaviour would become equally indistinguishable from the synthetic artificial intelligence program running on pure algorithmic logic. This is a concept I don't see discussed nearly as often as the stock Hollywood cliche of belligerent technology turning against us. I suspect because rather than an external threat narrative, it cuts to the very core of our own personal identity in a manner so uncomfortable that most people would prefer to remain ignorant, regardless of what possibilities may be uncovered. The possibility that your free will as a person is actually an illusion generated by a highly complex biological computer program is a truly terrifying concept, but more and more research being done in the area of neurology seems to indicate that this is the case. In the BBC Horizon documentary The Secret You, which I've linked in the low bar, the host Marcus de Sautoy is placed in an MRI machine and asked to make a number of arbitrary left or right decisions. However, as arbitrary as these decisions seemed to de Sautoy at the time, by observing his brain activity, the researchers are able to preempt the choices he's going to make a full 6 seconds before his conscious mind is even aware of the choices he's planning to make himself. A full 6 seconds. That information is as amazing as it is terrifying to our understanding of self. Now, say what you will about the methods and alleged successes of PUAs. Personally, I tend to think they're a bunch of self-glorified pussy beggars whose identity and self-worth is as equally dependent on shaming other men for not getting laid as it is for the meaningless sex they claim to actually be getting themselves. But after reading The Game by Neil Strauss many years ago, I must confess I was amazed by the concept of rigorously breaking down the human courtship ritual to a series of discrete logical steps: approach vectors, negging, indicators of interest, shit tests. The primary question is, how far can this rigorous deconstruction of human behaviour be taken? The neologisms of the PUA community are fairly loose and situational, but would it be possible to map out aspects of, or perhaps even the entire human condition, in the form of a strict algorithmic flowchart? Now, the entire human condition is somewhat daunting, but most complex systems are simply a collection of less complex systems. I think a good place to start would be the logic involved in an individual's choice to cheat on their partner. I believe fundamentally it's a very, very simple process of weighing up cost benefits of individual values, and can be mapped out in algorithmic terms with no more than 3 variables and 1 if statement as shown by the flowchart. The first variable to consider is the value the subject places on loyalty to their partner. The most common complaint you hear regarding cheating is, "How could you do this to me?" I consider it a fairly wrong-headed question, as it implies that the partner's feelings are somehow an external consideration in the act of cheating. I contend that unless the subject is actually planning to rub the infidelity in their partner's face, which admittedly is not unheard of, it's reasonable to assume that the partner is never actually supposed to find out, and therefore the partner's feelings are not a principal concern in the decision to cheat at all. What is a concern is the degree of loyalty the subject internally feels towards their partner. That is to say, how guilty will they personally feel living with the knowledge that they've cheated? Ultimately, it comes down to how much value the subject places on their current relationship, and there is a lot of considerations to that value. How long has the relationship been going? What is the social status of the partner? What are the future prospects of the relationship? How good is the sex? The second variable in the algorithm is the value the subject places on the act of cheating. Basically, where the first variable is concerned with long-term considerations, this is all about immediate short-term self-gratification. How horny is the subject at the moment? What is the social status of the cheating partner? How good-looking is the cheating partner? What is the cheating partner's potential sexual expertise? For example, if a subject actually had the opportunity to hook up with Justin Timberlake or Scarlett Johansson, that would be substantially more compelling than some random at a club. The third variable is basically a multiplier. It's the environmental considerations which could influence the relation of the first two variables in a way that the subject may make a decision they otherwise wouldn't have, all else being equal. Does the subject currently have loosened inhibitions due to drugs or alcohol? Is the subject emotionally unstable due to a bad day at work? If female, how close is she to estrus? There are a lot of things to consider. Essentially, it's very simple. If the value placed on cheating is greater than the value placed on the current relationship multiplied by the environmental inhibition modifier, then the subject will cheat on their partner. Now, at a glance, it would seem as though this model is somewhat useless for predicting the actions of an individual. Mathematically, it's a very, very simple decision-making procedure. What's not so simple is accurately determining a subject's internal variables, especially in the form of some consistent metric. Hypothetically, let's consider an individual who values their relationship at an 8. The value placed on the immediate gratification of cheating is 7, and the subject has had a few drinks after a shitty day at work, dropping their inhibition multiplier to 0.8. A relationship variable of 8 multiplied by 0.8 is 6.4, so the corrected value of the current relationship is less than the value placed on the immediate gratification of cheating. In this case, it makes logical sense for the subject to cheat. The problem is, how do we actually arrive at those numbers? The best method we have for finding out how much value an individual places on their relationship or interest in a person they may potentially cheat with is to ask them. That method of information gathering is particularly problematic for obvious reasons. At worst, the subject will intentionally lie about their feelings to save face. At best, what they can intellectually verbalize is very unlikely to actually map onto the base biological instincts that they are perhaps unaware of at a conscious level. That is to say, what someone wants versus what they say they want. Either way, it's not going to yield objectively consistent metrics to work with. However, there is actually relevant data that we can use to extrapolate some general assumptions based on this model. One of the interesting aspects of this model is that its simplified nature renders it gender neutral. The algorithmic logic of simply weighing up cost benefits is essentially the same whether male or female. However, there is objective data collected at the societal level showing very different trends in the value variables for men and women. The fact that 70% of divorces are initiated by women and the fact that the suicide rate for men post-separation is 10 times higher than women both show an objective difference in the general trends between men and women regarding the level of investment and value they each place on their respective relationships. We can't determine what the specific values of an individual are, but we can objectively say that based on societal data, generally men invest more and place more value on their relationships than women. All else being equal, if we apply this gender difference to the value variable of our algorithm, what should we expect to see? Men have always had a reputation of being liars and cheats. Lately, there have been a few opinion articles which suggest women may cheat at a rate similar to men, but are better liars about it. Most of these articles seem to be written with little to no reliable evidence and are very cautious in their wording so as not to offend the largely feminine reader base. I'm just going to come right out and say it. Even ignoring other practical factors such as women being in control of the sexual selection process, if this simple algorithm is accurate, or even just mostly accurate, I think we can safely assume that women are psychologically far more likely to cheat on their monogamous partners than men.